Ryan Doyle in for Michael Corrin here on The Arena. The issue of Egypt obviously dominating the headlines, so no reason that it wouldn't dominate this week's Jihad Watch. And of course, for that, we turn to Robert Spencer. Robert, it's interesting to me, Egyptians now on this side of the, let's say, of the Atlantic, finally starting to get the message. I hear that Egyptians in the United States of America are going to start to take their protests to the White House.
Yeah, they're rallying today, Ryan, and it's very interesting where they're rallying. They're going to the White House, but they're not stopping there. They're going to proceed from the White House to the offices of the Washington Post and to CNN to protest against the mainstream media's ridiculous pro-Muslim Brotherhood bias and the White House's pro-Muslim Brotherhood bias. Then, and I think most interestingly of all, they're going to the Council on American Islamic Relations main office in Washington, the counterpart, of course, of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the former CARE Canada. And they're going to protest there because they have quite rightly dubbed the Council on American Islamic Relations to be the Muslim Brotherhood's embassy in Washington.
Do you expect the message to be heard not only in the White House, but also in the newsrooms that you just mentioned, whether it's, the folks at CNN that are sitting up there watching these protests happen right before their very eyes, or will they just close the blinds and simply continue to be naive to the subject?
Well, I expect that it's going to be the latter. The mainstream media is deeply committed to this pro-Muslim Brotherhood, pro-Islamic supremacist course for reasons I do not know. And so I don't think that this protest is going to wake them up. I think it might alert some Americans to the reality of this incredible bias. And of course, reality is going to keep intruding. The mainstream media may keep pumping for the Muslim Brotherhood, but they're not going to be able to cover up the Brotherhood's atrocities forever or other Islamic supremacist atrocities and jihad attacks around the world. People do know that they're being lied to, and they know that increasingly.
Some of those atrocities that aren't getting enough coverage, at least in my estimation, in the mainstream media, are the persecution of Christians in Egypt. It would seem that this is a story that is swept under the rug, yet you have a lot of holy places, churches being burnt to the ground and looted.
That's right. Ryan, there have been 58 churches, Christian schools, monasteries, and other Christian institutions in Egypt that have been looted, destroyed, burned to the ground, destroyed in whatever way in Egypt over the last week. And this is by agents and supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood, incited by Muslim Brotherhood leaders. Then, for Western consumption, the Brotherhood turns around and condemns these attacks on their website. But they incited them. The Christian leaders know they incited them and are saying it straight out. The Muslim Brotherhood were the ones who called for aggression, and they are responsible.
One of the things that hasn't surprised me is the reaction from some world leaders, including those in Turkey and in Iran, where the conspiracy theories, the only thing that really shocked me is how long it took them to get to this point. But the idea that Israel was somehow behind what has gone on in Egypt. But of course, you had the president of Turkey coming out the other day making that statement. But a president of Turkey who, at least in Barack Obama's words, is a friend of the United States and a friend of Barack Obama's personally.
Yeah, that's right. Barack Obama has actually said that Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, is his closest friend among world leaders, and that he asks him for advice about how to raise his daughters. And so it's really quite remarkable that Erdogan is not a secular leader. He's an open Islamic supremacist, open in his support for Islamic law, and his desire ultimately to dismantle the secular Turkish government, which he is succeeded to a tremendous degree in doing already, and reimposing Islamic law in Turkey. And it's interesting also that in blaming the Jews, the all-purpose boogeymen for Islamic supremacists, he is echoing the Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran, and echoing also the Quran, which calls the Jews the worst enemies of the Muslims. And so this is something that is deeply ingrained in Islamic supremacist propaganda, that the Jews are secretly behind all sorts of plots against the Muslims, and the toppling of the Muslim Brotherhood is just the latest one.
When is Israel going to stop sitting back in all of this and allow themselves, stop allowing themselves to be the whipping boy in a circumstance like this? Because I wouldn't be standing for these kind of comments, and I certainly wouldn't be standing for the United States president to be standing up for the president of Turkey and calling him a friend.
Well, Israel, I think, has been remarkably deficient in the propaganda war and in answering the lies and distortions, particularly the Palestinian jihadist propaganda machine. Even the fact that Israel accepts the Palestinians as a nationality when there's never been a country of Palestine, a kingdom of Palestine, a state of Palestine, when Palestinians are not distinguishable ethnically from any of the other Arabs in the area. Even for them to have accepted the Palestinian nationality, which was actually invented by Yasser Arafat in the 1960s, is an indication of how disastrously they're approaching the propaganda war. But to the credit of the Israeli government, they have denounced Recep Tayyip Erdogan's blaming of Israel for the unrest in Egypt and have called him a new incarnation of Goebbels, which is quite correct and absolutely apt.
Let's end. I want to say this is on a funny note, but it made me chuckle a little bit. One of the 9/11 plotters having a bit of a tantrum in court, complaining about his olives and honey.
Yeah, well, he didn't get his olives and honey, and that's what he was upset about. And I think, we hear about Guantanamo as a torture camp all the time, as being a place where people are horribly mistreated. And here we have an example of this mistreatment. This guy didn't get enough olives and honey to suit him. Ramzi bin al-Shib's one of the 9/11 plotters. Actually, he would have been one of the hijackers, but he had trouble getting into the country in time to join the others. And so it's just interesting to compare this to the leftist and Muslim propaganda about Guantanamo, that what he's really upset about is not being waterboarded or being tortured in some other way or some sort of inhumane condition. He's upset because he didn't get the food he likes.
Yeah, I have to find it very, this is the part I laughed at. He called this psychological torture. I can only picture him just looking down at his plate and thinking to himself, come on, where are my olives and honey in this circumstance? What are you trying to do, make me crack? To compare it to things like waterboarding, I think is just absolutely ridiculous. But, trust a terrorist to put it on that level. Robert, we appreciate it as always.
Always a pleasure, Ryan. Thank you.